Hey guys, welcome to my Week 13 college football predictions video. This is actually the very last weekend of the 2023 regular season, so it's kind of bittersweet, but we have some pretty good matchups coming this week. Some games that will be deciding who will be representing every single conference in their conference championship, but also some potential matchups to see who might be best suiting themselves to get into that Final Four for the playoffs. So it's kind of a bittersweet moment. It is the last weekend, but let's get started breaking things down, seeing who's going to win, who's going to lose, and what we predict the final scores will be. Kicking things off Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on ESPN, we have the Egg Bowl. Number 13 Ole Miss sitting at 9-2, having a very strong year, versus Mississippi State sitting at 5-6, battling to try to get some bowl contention here. So with Mississippi State, they did fire Arnett. Will Rogers is back at quarterback, so that should kind of light things up because they have virtually absolutely no offense in any way whatsoever, and they've been getting torched on the defensive side of the ball. For Ole Miss, they have the weapons. So they have Jackson Dart at quarterback, they have Quinton Junkins at running back, they have Harris at wide receiver. So this team is pretty loaded here. When you look at the total team stats, you have the Ole Miss Rebels coming in here averaging 36.5 points per game. Mississippi State 23.2 points per game. And on the defensive side of the ball, Ole Miss has a pretty average defense. It's average to above average. They give up 23.7 points per game, whereas Mississippi State gets torched for 27.5 points per game. So with this game, this is a rivalry game. So this game can definitely be close. Both of these teams will be battling. Will Rogers has been banged up the whole season. He is not the same quarterback without Mike Leach calling plays. They completely went away from the air raid, and they brought in a 1960 offense, and that just does not work these days. That's why the team has been getting torched up and down the field. So look for Ole Miss to continue the hot streak here. But like I said, this is a rivalry game, so you never know what might happen. But Ole Miss comes in as 10.5-point favorites here. I have them continuing their great season, getting to 10 wins, setting them up for a very good January 1st bowl. But I have Ole Miss getting the win here, 30-17, and covering that spread as well. By the way, with these rankings, obviously, this is because the new poll doesn't come out till Tuesday night. So a lot of these teams will be moving up and some will be moving down. But this is the teams that won their games that should still be ranked coming into this weekend. Next, moving into Friday, because don't forget, this is the holiday week, so there's games all throughout the week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So things are pretty spread out. But coming in Friday now, at 12 p.m. on Fox, we have 5-6 TCU battling for bowl contention here, and we have number 14 Oklahoma sitting at 9-2. So Oklahoma was coming off of a very hard-fought win versus BYU, but I said it last weekend, do not take BYU for granted. They are a very physical, gritty team, and that was a one-possession win there. But also, Oklahoma lost Dylan Gabriel in the second half, so they were down to their freshman quarterback, Jackson Arnold. They did get the win, tough win, but no one knows yet, will Dylan Gabriel be playing this game? This guy has put up Heisman-level numbers this year. He has 3,300 yards, 27 touchdowns, 5 picks, and he runs a lot. But the Sooners' biggest problem is they have virtually no running back, number one. So they don't have a legit running game. That's the main thing that has been holding them back this year. But they are a much improved team overall. So props to Brent Venables there. They actually have a top 25 defense, so they've gotten a lot better because last year they were giving up 30, 40 points every single game. For TCU, they've kind of had a rotation at quarterback there. This team is much better than their 5-6 record. They almost beat Texas 2 weeks ago. Never overlook the Horned Frogs. They are a very tough, physical team. They can score some points here. Now, Oklahoma comes into this game as 11-point favorites here. We don't know yet if that's reasonable because we don't know if Dylan Gabriel's playing yet. That's the biggest question mark. With Jackson Arnold, they can still win the game. They did show that last weekend, but they're not as potent on offense because Dylan Gabriel is one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the country right now. But looking at the team stats, TCU can definitely move the ball. They average 30.1 points per game. Oklahoma, they average 40.8 points per game, so a very good offense under Dylan Gabriel. On the defensive side of the ball, TCU gives up 24.1 points per game, and Oklahoma gives up 20.2 points per game. So these teams are, obviously, it's kind of geared towards Oklahoma being the better team, and that's a pretty good spread there. I have Oklahoma getting the win here, 34-28. So they'll get the win, but they won't cover. Like I said, mainly due to the Dillon Gabriel question mark. We don't know if the guy is playing, so I can't have them scoring 50 points just because we don't know if Jackson Arnold can do that yet. The guy is just a freshman. The next game we have at 7:30 on ABC, we have 6-5 Texas Tech versus number 17 Texas Longhorns sitting at 10-1. Texas comes into this game as 12.5-point favorites here. That's a really big spread for a in-state rivalry game. This is the final time that these two teams could be playing as of right now for the foreseeable future. If you remember before the season started, the Big 12 commissioner stated that they hope that Texas Tech beats Texas on the way out of the Big 12 since they will be leaving the Big 12 after the season and going to the SEC. So a lot of noise from the commissioner that they are rooting actively for Texas Tech to win this game. Steve Sarkisian will not forget that. Texas has been on an offensive lull pretty much since they beat Bama. They've been just getting by games. They have not been taking control in the second half versus these teams. That's their biggest issue. They did lose Brooks for the season last year. That was a massive loss. The guy had 1,300 yards on the ground. That's a massive loss to lose him for the rest of the season, potentially going into the playoffs without one of the top 5 best running backs in the country. But they picked up right where they needed to this past weekend. CJ Baxter comes in. He has 20 carries for 117 yards. So they were able to pick up there, run the ball. Quinn Ewers, since he beat Bama, he's been just getting by through games. He has also been banged up this year, but he hasn't been living up to the hype coming into this season. Because don't forget, people had him as a top 10 pick, Heisman favorite. He definitely has not lived up to those expectations. They have Worthy, they have Mitchell, they have Whittington, they have running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. They have to get the offense back on track, specifically second half. Sarkisian has not been making adjustments at halftime. They've been getting outscored every single second half for the last 4 to 5 weeks. Texas, though, they have the playoffs on the horizon right now. They just have to win out. They have the win versus Alabama in Tuscaloosa. That's the best win of the 2023 college football season out of every single team. So as long as they win out, they should stay in front of Bama no matter what happens. Looking at the team stats, Texas Tech, they average 28.6 points per game. They give up 24.3 points per game. Texas averages 33.1 points per game. They have to get that up to 37, 38-ish. But they do have a top 20 defense, only giving up 18.2 points per game. Like we said, Texas, as of right now, is 12.5-point favorites here. I have Texas getting the win, 37-24, and covering that spread as well. Next game we have is one of the best matchups of this weekend. We have at 8:30 p.m. on Fox, number 11 Oregon State sitting at 8-3, coming off of that really close loss versus the Washington Huskies, versus number 6 Oregon sitting at 10-1. Oregon is 13.5-point favorites here. This is another game that is a great rivalry. This is the last time that these teams are playing for the foreseeable future because the Pac-12 is completely dissolving as of right now after the season. And Oregon, they are off to the Big Ten. Oregon State, they don't know where they are off to after this game. So a lot of big expectations here. This is a very tough team. Do not overlook Oregon State. They almost beat Washington this past weekend. They are a very tough team. They can run, throw, and they play very good defense. But Oregon, to me, as of right now, they are the best one-loss team on paper right now. They have a top 3 offense. This team can light it up. They come into this game averaging 46.5 points per game. That's in the top 3. Whereas Oregon State, they're no slouch. So they average 36.3 points. So they can definitely have a shootout if they need to have a shootout. When you look at defense, Oregon State has a very solid defense, a top 20 defense. They give up 20.6 points per game. But Oregon has a top 10 defense, giving up 16.7 points per game. So the Ducks are one of the best rounded teams in the country. Top 3 offense, top 10 defense. They just have to win out here right now. If they win out, they could potentially be facing Washington in the Pac-12 championship. If they beat Washington, then they have avenged their only loss this year and are setting them up themselves up for perfect position for the playoffs. Bo Nix is probably the Heisman favorite right now. This guy has 3,600 yards, 35 touchdowns, and only 2 picks, and he can also run the ball. They have a lot of weapons. They have Irving. They have Franklin. Oregon State, though, they also have DJU, and they have Martinez at running back. So this game is set up to be a great, fun game. A lot of build-up here the last time that these two teams play. But I have Oregon getting the win here, winning versus Oregon State 41-24 and covering that spread. And they are going on to face Washington in the Pac-12 championship for a shot to whoever wins that game could be getting into the playoffs. Next game is at 12 p.m. on CBS. We have number 16 Iowa at 9-2 versus Nebraska sitting at 5-6. So Nebraska is on a 3-game losing streak. Matt Rule's team has to win this game in order to get a bowl game. Nebraska is actually 1.5-point favorites here. So this game is considered to be really close. But when you look at the team stats, you see completely why. This game is just going to be awful, horrible to watch. Slugfest, sloshing game, just pathetic offenses. Look at Iowa here. 18.5 points per game. How is that even serious? How are you ranked in the top 25 if you only average 18.5 points per game? So if this team could just average 20 points per game, they'd probably be undefeated. But Kirk Ferentz is so hard-headed, he refuses to have a modern offense, and thus they only average 18.5 points a game and cannot even get the overs in 27 spreads. It's just a complete joke, but they have a top 10 defense giving up 12.4 points per game. I don't know how they only give up 12.4 points per game when they are on the field the entire game. But when you look at Nebraska, their offense is equally as garbage. They only average 18.7 points per game. So not much to be proud about there. They have a very good defense also, giving up 18.7 points per game. So like I said, if there's anything else on TV, anything at all, watch that instead of this game. But they are ranked, so you have to pick a score. I have Iowa getting the win here, 18-10. It's going to be awful, so I'm going with the plus 1.5 here. Next game we have is at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. We have 8-3 UTSA versus number 24 Tulane sitting at 10-1. Their only loss to Ole Miss, and that was without Chris Pratt, and they barely lost that game. Tulane comes in as 3-point favorites here. Tulane cannot cover the spread to save their life. They refuse to do it, and they keep barely beating really bad teams. But they do have weapons. So they have Pratt, they have Hughes at running back, but UTSA can score the ball. They have Frank Harris. They can move the ball. They can run it. They can throw it. So this team has the potential. This is an upset alert game, but Tulane is 3-point favorites here. Like I said, they never cover the spread, but they are bound to cover it at some point. So maybe this Friday is the day. But looking at the team stats, UTSA, they average 33.3 points per game. 33.1 points per game. So they can definitely move the ball. They can score. Tulane comes in averaging 27.8 points per game, but they do have the way better defense. So UTSA gives up 24.3 points per game, and Tulane gives up 18.5 points per game. I think Tulane is going to win this game. However, they've been flirting with disaster every single week, barely beating teams, 27-25, 27-23, 28-27, failing to cover the spread. If you keep barely beating teams, a loss will find you. So I'm going to go with the upset here. I'm going to go with that +3. I have UTSA getting the win. Their coach is getting a lot of praise, potentially also for the A&M job. I have UTSA winning this game 28-27. Next matchup we have at 4 p.m. on CBS. Number 9, Missouri sitting at 9-2 versus Arkansas sitting at 4-7. For Missouri, props to them. They came out of nowhere. They started this year unranked. They weren't even ranked till about week 5 or 6, and they're now 9-2, about to potentially be getting their 10th win in the SEC East. So having a great season so far. They have some offensive weapons. So they have Cook at quarterback closing in on 3,100 yards. They have Schrader at running back closing in on 1,300 yards. They have Burden at wide receiver who made some crazy catches last weekend in their win versus Florida. Like I said, he's closing in on 1,200 yards. So Mizzou comes in here as 7.5-point favorites here for Arkansas. They are bringing Sam Pittman back. They did fire Dan Enos, who was a complete disaster hire. But their team's been kind of waffling back and forth. They have really nothing to lose here because they're not even playing to get a bowl. They will not be playing in a bowl game this year. Looking at team stats, Missouri, they averaged 32.8 points per game, giving up 23.1 points per game. So a pretty well-rounded team there. And the Razorbacks average 27.7 points per game and give up 26.1 points per game. I have Missouri, who's had some pretty close games these last few weeks, and they barely beat Florida. That was a shootout last weekend, so kind of a scare there. But they have a big thing to shoot for, 10 wins. That's a massive accomplishment in the SEC for a team that came out of nowhere. I have them getting the win here, fighting to get to 10 wins, winning 30-27, but I do not have them covering that spread. Next game we have at 7:30 on NBC. Number 12, Penn State, sitting at 9-2. They did fire their offensive coordinator because their offense has been going nowhere the whole season. But just like Missouri, they are battling to get to 10 wins, which kind of seems to be their cap right now in the division that they're in. But still, a very strong season as of right now. They are playing Michigan State, sitting at 4-7. Michigan State has absolutely nothing to play for here but trying to get the upset win, which could be a big motivating factor. Penn State comes in as 21-point favorites. That's a pretty massive spread for an in-conference game. But looking at the team stats here, Penn State, they have a decent offense. The main problem is they have no vertical threat, 0 vertical weapons. Drew Aller did get hurt this past weekend, and they had to play Prabula. But Drew Aller is supposed to play Saturday, so he's supposed to be back. If he plays, that should definitely help the offense out. But they average 36.7 points per game, and they have a top 5 defense, giving up 12.5 points per game. So they can definitely shut people down, and Manny Diaz's defense gets a lot of sacks and a lot of pressure here. For Michigan State, they have an offense almost as bad as Iowa's, and that's pretty bad. They average 17.4 points per game versus a really good defense, and they give up 27.1 points per game. So they have absolutely no defense here. So I have Penn State winning this game just because Drew Aller is back, but I don't know how healthy he will be. But I have Penn State winning 35-13. I have them covering that spread here just barely. But that line could move because more info might come out throughout the week on Drew Aller. But as of right now, he is playing as of now. So I think that they'll cover that spread. Now we are moving on to the Saturday games at 7 p.m. on ESPN. We have number 4, Florida State, sitting at 11-0 versus Florida sitting at 5-6. Florida's lost a few games here straight. Billy Napier needs to get to a bowl game, so he has to win this game or his seat is going to be really hot. Florida State 6.5-point favorites here. Spread would probably be more, but Jordan Travis is out with that gruesome injury from last weekend. So he's out for the rest of the season. They have Rodemaker at quarterback there, so he has to fill in. But for Florida, Graham Mertz also went out last weekend, and they had Max Brown playing quarterback. So this could potentially be a battle of the backups. Who will win the backup battle? Florida has virtually absolutely no defense. When you look at the team stats here, Florida State averages 40.1 points per game. They only give up 16.9 points per game. So a top 15 defense, a top 15 offense. Florida scores 29.6 points per game. So that is serviceable, but they give up 27.9 points per game. So they do get torched a lot. And I think they've given up 30 points straight for a few weeks now. So they've been getting beaten pretty bad on the defensive side. So who's going to win this game? Florida State, even without Jordan Travis, they've been barely beating some bad teams, but they have the way better roster. It's not close. They have Benson. They have Coleman. They have a lot of weapons. They can run. They can throw. So that will definitely help out the backup to make some big plays here. This is a rivalry game, so anything can happen. But I have Florida State covering, winning 27-20. Like I said, they are going to cover, but I think this game will be kind of close just because there's going to be a lot of pressure here. These teams will be playing tough, and both teams will be without their starting quarterbacks. Next game that we have is at 12 p.m. on Fox. Going back to the Florida State game, even if they win that game, come to think of it, they might be left out of the playoffs because Jordan Travis is out. We don't really know how that's going to happen, but when the poll comes out Tuesday night, I can see Washington jumping them, which they should have been in front of them anyways. But what happens, if like they went out, but they don't have Jordan Travis. I don't know. But anyways, at 12 p.m. on Fox, we have number 2, the Ohio State Buckeyes at 11-0 versus number 3, Michigan at 11-0. Michigan, first time being a favorite in a while. They are 3.5-point favorites here. This is the game of the weekend, the game of the year so far. Everyone has been looking forward to this game every single season. This is the game of whoever wins this will for sure be in the playoffs. That's what it is this year. So it's Ohio State versus Michigan, Ryan Day versus Harbaugh. Not Harbaugh. We have the offensive coordinator. What's his name? Sherman Brown. So he will be coaching. Harbaugh's out. That's a massive loss. That's a big letdown here. Since he's went out, they've won the 2 games, but the offense has been very conservative. Running the ball. J.J. McCarthy has not been going vertical at all. I don't know what's happened to the offense, but I had Michigan winning this game throughout the whole year till Harbaugh went out, and then the offense basically turned into a 1980s offense. So they've been running the ball down people's throats, but Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, they're not having the year that they had last year. There's been a lot of question marks there. They're not getting the yards that they got last year. They are getting touchdowns, but they're only averaging 3 to 4 yards per carry. That's not going to cut it versus the Buckeyes defense. They've played run-first teams, and J.J. McCarthy is a complete shell of himself the last 2 weeks. So that raised a lot of questions to me. I don't know if they were playing conservative just because they didn't want to show anything going into the Buckeyes game, but that's completely changed my view of this team because I think, Sharon, he doesn't want to cost them the game, so he's being conservative. Rely on the defense, run the ball. Whereas Harbaugh, had he been there, he would be doing the same thing, but on 4th downs, 3rd and longs, they would be going vertical. They wouldn't be afraid to do that because it's Harbaugh's call. So if it doesn't work, that's on Harbaugh. But Sherman Brown, he doesn't want to be the guy to make the bad play call, and he gets the pressure because Harbaugh's not coaching. I think that's going to hold them back here. Looking at the team stats, Buckeyes average 33.6 points per game. Crazy defenses here. Top 5 defense giving up 9.3 points per game. Michigan, the #1 defense in college football, but their offense averages 38.3 points per game, and their defense gives up 9. So this is tough here for me because, like I said, I had the Buckeyes winning the whole year up to the last 2 weeks. Kyle McCord is not a good quarterback at all. He has the best, if not the second best, wide receiver core in the country, and this guy is just barely closing in on 3,000 yards now with an offensively focused team, but they have a great defense. They've played some good teams. Michigan's only played one good team, and that was Penn State, and they barely beat them, but that's with the backup coach running the ball 38 straight times. I have the Buckeyes getting the upset here. I'm going with the +3.5. I have them winning 24-17. I'm not confident in that because, like I said, I had Michigan winning the whole year, but I have not seen it since Harbaugh has been out the last 2 weeks. And it's a real shame, too, because I wanted to see Ryan Day versus Harbaugh again. Next game we have coming in at 12 p.m. on ABC. We have 6-5 Kentucky versus number 10 Louisville, sitting at 10-1, coming off of a win versus Miami's tough defense. Louisville averages, well, they are a 7-point favorite here right now. So looking at these team stats here, Kentucky, they average 27.7 points per game. They give up 24.3 points per game. Louisville has a top 25 offense, a top 20 defense. They score 33.2 points per game and only give up 18.4 points per game. So Louisville has not fared well in this game the last few years. They are hands down the better team this year. I have Louisville getting the win here. They have the weapons. They have Plummer at quarterback. They have Jordan at running back. They have Thrash at wide receiver. He can do a little bit of everything. So I have Louisville getting the win here, 27-24, just not covering that spread. Next game at 12 p.m. on ESPN, we have 7-4 Texas A&M versus LSU, who's number 15. They sit at 8-3. So LSU comes into this game as 10.5-point favorites here. Since the Aggies fired Jimbo Fisher, they are 2-0. They have been doing pretty decent on both sides of the ball, and they also do have a lot of injuries. So this team is one of the most talented teams on roster, but LSU, they are having a monumental year from Jaden Daniels, who, had they only lost 2 games, he would hands down be the Heisman favorite. He has 3,600 yards, 36 touchdowns, 4 picks, and he's ran for almost 1,000 yards. So he's been lighting things up here. He has ran for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So he's accounted for 46 touchdowns. That is crazy. They are going to score no matter who they play because they want to pad Daniel's stats as much as possible. They also have one of the best wide receiver corps in the country, led by Neighbors, closing in on 1,500 yards. When you look at the team stats, so the Aggies average 34.5 points per game, but they have a very solid defense, giving up 19.5 points per game. Whereas the LSU Tigers, they average 46.8 points per game, but give up 27.5 points per game. I do not think that the Aggies will be able to slow down Daniels. They do have a very good team, very competitive team, and they have a very good defense. But LSU has Jaden Daniels, who should be the Heisman frontrunner right now, but they've just lost too many games. So by default, he's just the next guy up. But I have LSU getting the win here, 38-24, so they will score on that good defense, and they will cover the spread and get to 9-3. Next game at 3 p.m. on the Pac-12 Network, we have the 4-7 Colorado versus number 22 Utah, sitting at 7-4. So Utah is probably not going to be ranked when the new poll comes out, but they are ranked as of right now until that happens. Utah's 21.5-point favorites here. With Colorado, they've been completely sliding back, completely fallen off the rails and crashed. They average 29.2 points per game and giving up a whopping 35.9 points per game. Utah, they don't have a very good offense, but they average 24.6 points per game, and they only give up 20 points per game. I have Utah cruising to the win here because Colorado has absolutely nothing going for them, a complete train wreck. But they still had a good season because last year they only won 1 game. So that's still a improvement on last season. But I have Utah winning 38-17, but not covering that spread. Next game we have at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. We have number 8 Alabama at 10-1 versus Auburn at 6-5. Alabama 15-point favorites here, so a pretty big spread for this rivalry conference game. But you definitely see why the spread is so big. So Bama has been hot for the last 6 to 7 weeks. Milroe has been playing great. He has 2,300 yards, 19 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he can run the ball. They have a lot of weapons, and they have a very good defense. For Auburn, sitting at 6-5, they have absolutely nothing going for them under Luke Fickell right now. They got steamrolled this past weekend by New Mexico State. What was it, like 31 or 34-10? So there's not much to say there when they paid them $1.8 million to come to Auburn and just curb stomp them. So pretty embarrassing loss there. So they're going to pretty disheartened this game. Bama, they average 36.5 points per game, only give up 17.4 points a game. Auburn, they average 27.5 and give up 21.5. But like we said, Auburn has been completely deflated losing that game last weekend, whereas Bama has everything to play. They want to win this game. They want to get to the SEC championship. They want to beat Georgia, and they want to get into the playoffs. I have Bama cruising to the win here, 38-17, and covering that spread. The next game we have at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN is another in-state rivalry game. We have number 17 Arizona sitting at 8-3. A great year from Jed Fish so far. They came out of nowhere. They're having a really good year in a really tough, competitive Pac-12. They are playing 3-8 Arizona State. Arizona comes in as 11.5-point favorites here. Looking at the team stats here, so Arizona is a very well-rounded team. They average 32.1 points per game and only give up 20.6 points per game. Arizona State, they're bad at virtually everything they do. So they only score 17.3 points per game. That's horrendous. And their defense is just as bad, 29.4 points per game. So this game is not going to be close, but it could be competitive because it is an in-state rivalry game, but it's just not going to be. So I have Arizona cruising to the win here, 31-17, and covering that spread. So props to Jed Fish. This team is potentially closing in on 10 wins with a possible bowl win. Next game, we're just going to blow past because they shouldn't be ranked once the new poll comes out. But Vanderbilt 2-9 versus number 18 Tennessee at 7-4. They should get removed from the polls. They might hold on in the very, around 24 to 25, but they should get removed with 4 losses. But Tennessee, 27-point favorites here. Joe Milton at quarterback. The guy cannot throw accurately past 5 yards. They have a pretty good run game, though, and they have a serviceable defense. Like I said, we won't focus too much here. Not anything against Josh Heupel's team, but they're probably going to get kicked out of the top 25 once the new poll comes out. They are 27-point favorites here. I have them getting the win versus Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has absolutely nothing going for them. They can't play offense, defense, or special teams. So they will lose this game. They will lose this game bad. 41-17. I just don't have them covering that spread. Next game we have at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. We have BYU at 5-6, just barely lost to Texas this past weekend versus number 23 Oklahoma State, sitting at 8-3. They had a very strong, tough, competitive win versus Houston. I did say that they would win, but barely, and they controlled the second half, barely won that game. Basically because of Gordon. The guy is one of the top 5 running backs in the country. They can't throw the ball at all, but they can definitely run it. They're going to run it right down BYU's throat. They want to get the 9 wins. They hope that they have the tiebreaker with the Sooners. So if the Sooners lose, they could possibly get into the Big 12 championship to have a shot at Texas. At BYU, they average 22.1 points per game, so that's awful. They give up 28.9 points per game. That's awful, but they are a tough physical team nonetheless, and they can be very competitive. They've had a lot of injuries. That's what's derailed their season so far. For the Cowboys, they average 29.3 points per game, and their defense gives up 26.7 points per game. So this game's a 17.5-point spread here in favor of Oklahoma State. I have the Cowboys getting the win here, winning this game 38-21. So they'll get the win, but I don't have them covering. Next game we have coming up at 4 p.m. on Fox, 5-6 Washington State versus number 5 Washington, sitting at 11-0. Washington 16.5-point favorites here, so this is a pretty massive spread. Washington is coming off of that really close win this past weekend versus Oregon State. Washington State, their season has completely fallen apart the last, 7 to 8 weeks. So it's completely fallen off the cliff there. Washington just has to win out. Win this game, get to the Pac-12 championship, have a potential shot at Oregon, beat them, and you are in. They have had one of the toughest schedules so far this year. They have 3 to 4 wins versus current top 25 teams. That's pretty impressive right now. And they also have a win versus number 6 Oregon. That's a pretty massive win. 16.5-point favorites here. They have Penn, who is number 1 or 2 in the Heisman odds right now, closing in on 3,700 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 picks. Johnson has been coming on as of late the last 3 weeks running the ball. He is closing in on 900 yards. And just like the Buckeyes, they have the number 1 or 2 best wide receiver corps in the country, led by Odunze. And that guy is always open. If he's not open, he always makes competitive catches. So they can just throw the ball right down your throat. No one can stop them. Washington State, they average 32.6 points per game. They give up 28.5 points per game. Washington, they average 39.3 points per game with a serviceable defense, giving up 23.2 points per game. I have Washington getting the win here, 40-27. They won't cover that spread, but I have Penix going off for 350 to 400 yards nonetheless. Next game at 7 p.m. on the Pac-12 network, we have number 19 Notre Dame at 8-3, looking for their 9th win versus Stanford, sitting at 3-8. So flip-flop records here. We have Notre Dame coming in as 26-point favorites here. Massive spread there. But when you look at the team stats, you definitely see why. So Notre Dame, they average 37.5 points per game. They have a top 10 defense, giving up only 16 points per game. Stanford, they average 20.4 points per game, and their defense gives up 36 points per game. That's one of the worst. That is horrible. Sam Hartman, look for an SMA. They're going to throw the ball. They're going to run this ball. This game should at no point be close. This is the final regular season game for Sam Hartman. This guy's played about 15 years here. So they're going to light it up. I have Notre Dame winning 45-17 and covering that spread. Next game we have at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. Number 1 Georgia at 11-0 versus Georgia Tech at 6-5. Georgia 23-point favorites here. No matter what happens in this game, win or lose, Georgia gets to the SEC championship to play potentially Alabama. But they definitely want to finish the season undefeated, possibly have 3 straight years without a loss. Georgia Tech, though, they are actually a pretty decent team. So they came on the last 7 to 8 weeks since, what was that? They lost at Bowling Green. They've played very well since then. They've had some very competitive games. But Georgia's firing on all cylinders right now. Probably the hottest team in the last 2 weeks. They have Carson Beck closing in on 3,400 yards. They can run it. They can throw it. They don't have a great run game, but they have a very good passing game and a serviceable run game led by, obviously, a top 10 defense. Looking at the team stats here, Georgia, they average 40.4 points per game, so they can light it up. Georgia Tech, they average 31.9 points per game, so that's definitely pretty good. Looking at the defense here, Georgia Tech has a god-awful defense, giving up 30.5 points per game. Georgia, they give up 15.1 points per game. So that's a pretty big deal there. That's not close at all. Georgia has a very good team on both sides of the ball, and they play great special teams. This game is not going to be close in any way whatsoever. Look for Georgia to take a massive first-half lead. Then it's time to rest the starters, get them ready for Bama. So they'll pull the starters probably around the middle to end of third quarter. I have Georgia getting the win here, 41-17, and covering the spread. Next game is another team that should get removed from the top 25, but they are ranked as of right now at 7:30 p.m. on ESPN2. Number 25, Kansas at 7-4 versus Cincinnati at 3-8. Kansas is 6.5-point favorites here. We'll run through this pretty quick because, like I said, Kansas is probably going to get removed from the top 25 when the new poll comes out. Well, they definitely should be. They've been beat up at quarterback. Bean, Daniels, third-string guy. So you really don't know what you're getting. This is a very competitive team, though, and they can run the ball really well with Neal at running back. Had they had their quarterback the whole season, this is a potential 9-win team right now, which is pretty dang good for Kansas football. Cincinnati has been steamrolled since they came to the Big 12. I have Kansas getting the win here, 25-17, and covering that spread. Next game at 8 p.m. on the ACC network, we have number 20 North Carolina at 8-3 versus NC State at 8-3. This is an in-state rivalry game, so anything can happen, and they are both battling to see who can get to 9 wins. UNC 2.5-point favorites here. Drake May. UNC definitely has the weapons. NC State has the better defense. Looking at the team stats, you have the Tar Heels. They average 38.1 points per game. NC State, 25.7 points per game. UNC gives up 26 points per game, but NC State, they give up 20.2 points per game. For UNC, this is potentially Drake May's last game here. He will be a top 5 pick. He will go in the first round. He might play the bowl game, but just in case he doesn't, this could be the last time that you see him as a Tar Heel. He's closing in on 3,400 yards. They have Hampton at running back. They can just run it right down your throat. He's closing in on 1,500 yards. They have weapons at wide receiver with Des Walker. So they can run it. They can throw it. They don't play great defense, but they have some good playmakers, especially at quarterback. I have UNC getting the win here, 31-27. Very close, and they will cover the spread as well. Final matchup at 8 p.m. on Fox, 6-5 Iowa State versus number 21 Kansas State at 8-3. Kansas State 9.5-point favorites here. When you look at the team stats, you have Iowa State. They average 24.8 points per game. Really good top 20 defense, giving up 20.5 points per game. They just barely lost to Texas. K-State, they average 38.1 points per game. They have a good defense, giving up 19.3 points per game. They are the defending Big 12 champs. If a couple things fall their way this season, they are a 10-win team. But nonetheless, they are 9.5-point favorites here. They are the better team. They can score, and they play really good, sound defense. I have Kansas State getting the win, 27-18, but not covering that spread. And that's my breakdown of the Week 13 final regular season matchups. Hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks.